Hello. In my previous video I explained how several times each day we naturally and spontaneously entered an altered state of consciousness. This happens, for example, when we're lost in a daydream, or deeply absorbed in a novel or a film, or listening intently to a piece of music. And of course, altered states occur at night when we fall asleep. I also showed you a photograph or video of one of my subjects, a female subject, who was learning how to control a toy train using only her brain. Yeah, without having to turn a dial or click a switch, she was able to make the train start and stop, speed up or slow down. In later studies, I actually used a smaller toy train, one small enough to fit in a briefcase. This enabled me to take the train into people's homes, for example, or their places of work, when I was training them in altered states of consciousness. It was much more relaxed for them to do that at home or in a place familiar to them, like a place of work, rather than in rather austere conditions of my laboratory. So here's a short film which was made about my work with senior executives by a local television station. In it I explain exactly what I'm doing, and the equipment being used, and why I'm doing it.
This train isn't going very far, but it's not leaves on the line or the wrong kind of snow that's the problem. It's because the person hooked up to this contraption isn't relaxed enough. The brain train is the first ever toy to monitor stress. The engine only moves around the track when the person wired up starts to relax.
Well, this has been wired up to electronics. Two bits of electronics, essentially. One is an EEG. Now, that's a machine which you can find in hospitals. It's used by a diagnostician, for instance, to diagnose, let's say, epilepsy, and it reads the electrical patterns in the brain. Well, we've got a very tiny EEG, probably the smallest one ever developed, and this is monitoring my brain and looking for particular patterns of brain waves which are associated with a subjective state of relaxation. So the more I relax mentally and physically, because this is measuring my physical relaxation, the faster the train goes around the track.
Dr. Lewis invented the toy as part of his work with helping burnt-out executives. The slightest sign of tension monitored by the electrodes will bring the train to a halt.
It's essentially measuring how relaxed or how tense you are. Yes, it can get very stressful. It gets stressful in the two situations. One is that sometimes the train comes off the track, and can the subject remain, relaxed? Because essentially what we're trying to train people in industry to do, in business to do, is to remain relaxed, not just when they're sitting at home with their feet up, watching television, but actually when they're in a crisis situation.
But why a toy train? If playing with a toy train sounds rather childish, well, that was actually the main reason for me to use them in the first place, because otherwise people would be looking at, for example, a computer screen reading some kind of a printout. I think this enables my volunteers, to learn through playing, which was the way we all learn as children. I also found it very interesting to see how these often highly competitive executives would try to compete with one another to drive their train further and faster than anyone else. And this, of course, is exactly the opposite mental state to the one needs to be in order to produce any altered state of consciousness and so control the train. The train is controlled by production in the volunteers' brains of what are called alpha rhythms. These are rhythms which I'll be focusing on in this and my next video. So, what are alpha waves and how do they affect our state of mind? Technically, alpha is the name given to electrical frequencies in the brain between 8 and 14 hertz or cycles per second. Unlike other brain waves, which I will discuss in a future video more fully, these electrical currents are extremely weak. If you're actually interested in the technical details of this, they actually have a voltage of between 70 and 150 microvolts. So they are very, very low currents. and this makes it very hard to detect them using sensors which we attach, as in the video you just saw, to the surface of the skin. And this of course covers the bones, and there are some other covers within the skull which protect the brain itself. So you're trying to read very small currents through actually what is something quite a dense material. Now, although these signals had been detected in animals during the 19th century, in 1929, the Austrian neurologist Hans Berger was able to record the first ever brainwaves in a human being, and for this purpose he used his 15-year-old son Klaus as a kind of a guinea pig. It didn't hurt the boy at all. And he was eventually able to record these alpha waves, these waves between 8 and 14. So because he was the first to discover them, he named them alpha waves for the first. And later he discovered a slightly faster wave, which he termed beta waves. Now today we know there are several other types of waves, delta waves and high beta, all of which I'll describe in greater detail in the 5th part of this series. For his contribution to our greater understanding of brain function, Berger was actually nominated in the 1930s for a Nobel Prize. But because he was Jewish, and because the Nazis had come to power in 1933 with their very strong their genocidal anti-Semitic program, they refused to allow Berger the permission to leave the country and claim his reward, so he never got it. And in fact, very sadly, in 1941, driven to despair by the persecution he was suffering, Berger took his own life by hanging. As you can see from this photograph, the equipment he used to make his recordings was big and bulky. Fortunately for me, by the time I started my research, in about the mid-80s, the device needed to make the recordings had been miniaturized very significantly, and this was especially true for non-clinical research. For example, in a hospital you might be looking for epilepsy or a brain tumour. In my work I was just looking for altered states of consciousness. Another very important change was that the output from the machines, which had formerly been shown as squiggly lines on the sheet of moving graph paper, could now be pictured as different colours on a computer screen. The picture here from one of my volunteers shows alpha waves in her head, coloured red and orange and purple. This is the area covering the front part, the frontal regions of the brain. Now in the next video I'm going to describe a very effective alpha production technique which you could learn for yourself. Some of you, if you're into meditation, may already have heard of it. It's called Zazen, or sitting with Zen. And studies have shown that Zazen is accompanied by low frequency alpha waves. These would be around 8 cycles per second, combined with a steady theta wave. These are waves at about 4.5 cycles per second. Plus there's a very significant increase in skin resistance, actually an increase of about 500 to 600%. This is always associated, as I will explain in video number 5, with a deep sense of physical relaxation. Studies of Japanese Zen masters during Zazen indicated that in less than 1 minute, the fast beta waves which we normally produce, which are associated with problems solving, being very alert, maybe with stress or anxiety, they decline, they give way to beta at between 11 and 12 cycles per second, with amplitudes, that's the amount of voltage, ranging from 45 to 50 microvolts. After about 30 minutes, their lower frequency alpha waves, together with some theta, appear, and these patterns lasted for some while after the meditation session itself had ended. In my next video, I will show the powerful effects of alpha produced almost instantly by a young English Buddhist monk I work with named Matthew Armet. He's truly a remarkable young man, and I'll be telling his story in my next video. And among the astonishing feats he was able to accomplish while I was studying him at the University of Sussex, he moved himself quickly into an altered state of consciousness, and in this state he was able to push my Land Rover Cruiser, which weighed several tons, across a university car park. And to do this he attached a spear to the front of the vehicle at one end, with the spear point, a very sharp spear point, placed against his throat with no protective barrier. With this he was able to actually move my car several feet. Now, please don't try this at home, because the consequences for a non-trained person could well prove fatal. But why bother at all? What are the benefits of learning how to produce an alpha state wherever and whenever you wish? Apart from the almost superhuman feats demonstrated by highly trained individuals like Matthew, research has shown that alpha with some theta combined with physical relaxation creates a state of great relaxation and tranquility. Any stress or anxiety you may have been suffering from will gradually disappear. You'll find your mind becoming sharper and clearer and much better able to think rationally, or decide effectively, or learn and recall new information more easily and faithfully. Well, thanks very much for watching. Do please subscribe if you want to be sure of never missing another of these videos, which are posted weekly either by my hypnotherapist colleague Dan Jones or by myself. Meanwhile, goodbye and thanks very much for watching.